All right, everybody. Looks like we've got a good group to get started with. I'm sure we'll have people coming in as we get started. So, yeah, let's go ahead and move into the topic. So, let me move to our agenda. So, my name is Thomas Simmons. I am the business director here at ARCHVISTA Consulting. I'm also one of the partners. We've been a partner of Graphisoft for many years, and also with ArchiFrame. So I'm going to give you an overview of the ArchiFrame briefly, and just how it integrates with Archicad. And then we will switch into Michael Winstone. He is the principal of Winstone Design, and he is going to review his firm and also give you an overview of how he's using ArchiFrame in his practice. And he's going to show you several projects as well, so he'll take you through a real live overview of how he's using that. So ArchiFrame and Archicad work together. So basically, ArchiFrame is an add-on to Archicad. So you need Archicad to start with, and then you can use a plugin to for ArchiFrame and Archicad, and it will help you do framing, as Michael will talk about, and I'll talk about in more detail in a second. So to begin with, one of the things that ArchiFrame was started with in its very early development, and has moved even beyond that now, is the focus on wood framing, and that is still its focus. And that can help you for framing for a variety of components, as we'll talk about today. Obviously, you start with your model in Archicad first. It can then help you with framing for your roof, for your floors, for your walls, and then it can output documentation as well. It also can be used with light gauge steel framing, so it's not just limited to wood framing, as I mentioned. We've got a client here in the Bay Area who has used this, and there's others around as well. So if you are doing light gauge steel framing, and you're working either developing it internally, as you can see in the photo below, or using CNC, this can be definitely something to help you with that workflow. So whether you're using steel or whether you're using wood, same applies to both. One of the real powers of ArchiFrame is not just the modeling side of it, it's also the ability to be able to use it to automatically draw your dimension lines, automatically generate cut list. It enables you to edit in elevation, floor plan, and 3D the framing that is generated. The projections that are created are available for front, top, back, and bottom for all the framing. And it can also do exterior paneling, such as weatherboards, exterior cladding, and split paneling. For roof structures and drawings, it has a lot of benefits. Some of those, as you can kind of see here, is that it can do drawing planes to guide the tilted pieces. They have support for timber frame joint types and also simpler angle cuts, such as dovetail or tenon and mortise. It can support trusses, creating those. And you can also use it to adjust rafters to the valley rafter, and of course place valley and hip rafters as well. As I mentioned earlier, it can also create floor structures. That's something that is not easy to do in Archicad as well. And so here, as you can see, it automatically will generate these floor structures for you. Those are then editable. Those beams can be for floor elements, can be matched to the construction grid, full control for every single beam, and cuts can also be made into steel beams using ArchiFrame groove tools. So there's that ability to edit other elements as well. It's also going to be used for to create multiple structural layers. So as this kind of example shows here, where you've got several layers combined together, is that it allows you to manage those real world layers and rotations, the automatic connections at corners, to adjust those rules for studs and planks at corners, and also to re-angle and organize those wood beams and planks. And then you can output from ArchiFrame to BIM, and this can be used for a variety of different types of outputs. Dimension drawings for manual manufacturing, as an example. Of course, for cut lists, you can export to Excel, XLS, or the TXT files. You can, of course, send to printing. And one of the big strengths that it has is the ability to integrate CNC for machine manufacturing. So these are all integrated as part of different components to ArchiFrame. And there are 5 parts to ArchiFrame in terms of what you can purchase, what you could start with. There's the full ArchiFrame package, which has all the extensions for wood structures. If you are looking for something for steel frame, then you can also talk to us. We have abilities to be able to transition that and to integrate those workflows into it. There's also AF Start. This is a specific toolkit that has been developed specifically for architects. So that's also an available option. If you're in school, we have an EDU for students. We also have a trial version that's available for free for 1 month. And then if you are working where you will need to integrate with CNC for machine manufacturing, then we can also integrate with that as well, and that's an additional plugin at ArchiFrame. So with that, I'm going to hand this off to Michael, who's going to really go into the details of how this is used on real-world projects. So Michael, I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter.
Thank you, Tom. Never a dull moment, always technicalities at the beginning of a project or presentation for sure. So awesome. Thanks, Tom, for the introduction. It's really great to be here and to get to share my workflow with you all. Highlight kind of what works for me, share some feedback that I've been getting from contractors or engineers in the field. I truly believe that sort of combining ArchiFrame with Archicad along with other built-in toolkits is a huge advantage in terms of documentation and this building efficiency in terms of the construction aspect of it all. So I'm excited to share with you guys sort of how I use that in the day-to-day, because truly I do use this every day. So a quick introduction to myself and our business and what we do. So my name is Mike Winstone, and I operate a boutique design firm in Muskoka, Ontario. Winstone Design is my business. I'm the sole employee of that business. And I think it's important to note that strictly just because I want to stress that the level of detail produced by tools such as Archicad and ArchiFrame are together completely possible and efficient to be managed on your own, and integrating this into a bigger firm is definitely easy to integrate. I've been operating my business since 2020, previously as a dedicated Revit user, but as of 2023, so for the last 2 years now, I've been fully using Archicad. So it was definitely a stressful switch. I can kind of talk a little bit about sort of the benefit that I see with Archicad. But then along with that came ArchiFrame, and its integration has completely transformed the way that I do documentation. The beauty of where I get to live and work is that the landscape offers a completely different palette for each building. So primarily where we live, it's a lot of waterfront and lakefront properties that caters towards vacation homes for people. So because of the landscape with large granite rock outcroppings, lakefront properties, heavily treed areas, or sloping lots, every design, every building needs to be approached with an individual mentality. So the ability to create drawings effectively and efficiently is really important for me, since every building, every design detail needs to be different and catered to that specific project. So as I kind of just go through here, I sort of follow the same 6 days process that many of us likely do. So starting with the pre-design and sort of concept or schematic design, I then go into full design development. So after I cater to a concept design with somebody, the design development phase is where I really start to implement the ArchiFrame components by adding the beams, the columns, not necessarily the wall framing at this stage yet. I do that more on the documentation side of things, but it's really implemented in my day-to-day business and how I basically build the models out. And you can kind of see here, I do a little bit with contractor selection and construction observation, just to make sure that everything's kind of going to plan. But the documentation is really important to me, where I really value having every 3D element in the model, just so that any section view or detail or communication with the contractor is always the most information possible. So it just makes it easy for everybody. So my mission is to ensure that buildings last for generations, and make sure that the building is both beautiful and functional. And we achieve that by ensuring that the more information we can dump into the model during the design phase makes it possible for high level and well thought out detail to make that building last. Tom touched on it a bit, and I'm sure we're all familiar with BIM, but it's the holistic process of creating and managing information for a built asset. I think more than that, though, BIM is the ability to transfer the knowledge and the thought process of the designer or the architect or engineer, somebody like ourselves, to the contractor in a more streamlined manner, which ultimately minimizes questions and the time I need to spend on site after the construction has started, which ultimately translates into more time for me and computer work and the projects I need to do back at home. Winstone Design, so myself, is a fully tailored design house. We do everything from site plans to design to permitting, and then the post-documentation site visits. I like to focus on new builds if possible, but we do a lot of accessory buildings such as garages and boathouses, which I'll kind of show since we're a lot of lakefront properties. And every single building, whether it's a 16-foot by 16-foot shed in the backyard versus a 7,000 square foot new cottage home build, they all get the same level of detail, the same workflow process through everything. So it's not something that needs to be catered towards just the higher end, more expensive projects. So just to kind of cap this off, just a few sort of projects that I've worked on in the past couple of years, and just sort of streamline efficiencies. This project, for example, was a new cottage and a boathouse that you can kind of see there. This was actually on an island on Lake Muskoka. And the challenge that we obviously run into with island projects is we need to make sure that that documentation is 100% there. In terms of barging materials to site, this really gets, the cost can be driven up very high very quickly. So by having detailed documentation, detailed cut lists, we're really able to fine tune everything to get this to be built as quickly as possible, which given our winters in Canada is also an important thing to do. Just a couple other smaller or bigger projects here, I guess you could say. Even something small, I'll kind of go into this bunkie in a little bit more detail, just to kind of show you how the cut lists really make this pop and make it good for a contractor. And then this sort of here is the project I'm going to go into the most detail with. So we can see that there's a lot of different changing roof lines, exterior decks, waterproofing details related to this. And in terms of trying to get the construction aspect across to the contractor, the cut list and ArchiFrame really help sort of dial in a project such as this. You can kind of see here how I've been able to leverage ArchiFrame and Archicad to create layer properties and 3D documentation, sort of separate out foundations, beams and columns, wall framing, trusses, so that those layer combinations can be output and then imported into something like BIMX, so the contractor can see everything I see. But the other beautiful aspect of this is, especially when getting into custom details like the large expansive glass, I'm able to do a final crash detection check to make sure that our lintel sizes are correct. They're not interfering with the window openings or the door openings. We have the appropriate jack studs underneath the side so that we have the wall framing aspect there. And because it's all automatically put in, I don't need to deal with a lot of 2D documentation for plan views or details to add this information in after the fact. So if there is a detail that is missing from the contractor that he needs, I can easily pull off a new section, and I don't need to think about what I did a year ago. That information is already in the model. So that's pretty much it, just for sort of the quick high level presentation, just to kind of introduce everything. But just to sort of show how it interacts with Archicad, I've got some models pulled up here. So starting with sort of the more simple and then going with the more complex. This is just a simple 22-foot by 22-foot garage that was done for some customers local to me here. They're actually friends of mine, but just sort of to see the level of detail that gets put into this. So this is sort of the generic 3D model that most people would see, but then just simply by creating a layer property, we can take that model and turn that model into a complete wood frame structure with individual components for lintels, trusses, outlooker framing, sub fascias, nailers for soffit. Again, it's very simple. It's very straightforward and easy to use. I won't do much examples, but just to kind of show you the power and the level of detail within this, all of this is automatically generated. And in terms of scale and time, this entire building was probably framed out in under an hour for trusses, wall framing, and everything. And this entire project was probably completed start to finish from concept to final documentation in about 32 hours. So it's a really efficient process once you get sort of the parameters set up. And the people at ArchiFrame have been really fantastic in terms of catering and tailoring the parameters that I want to see on the plans, which has been fantastic. This is that bunkie project I kind of showed a little bit of detail on previously as well in that slideshow. So again, it looks relatively simple and basic from a high level perspective. But again, if we drive into 3D framing aspect, there's a lot more going on that sometimes is difficult to convey in a 2D detail or element. So integrating steel headers and steel columns, again, these are all done with ArchiFrame components. So I'll kind of show in a little bit in the other project how it's really an advantage to use an ArchiFrame beam versus an Archicad beam in terms of documentation. But the ability to frame out these walls, show the lintels, see how the rear concrete walls actually interact, and we can frame the rake walls on top and build the lintels into those components, I think is really powerful. But even something where we're doing an unconventional roof framing structure, I have a TJI roof rafter in an unconventional direction with a sistered on 2x10 beside it. So the ability to sort of have this in the 3D model and share it with the contractor through BIMX and walk them through this so they can see it saves me time in the documentation side, as opposed to needing to do 3 different details to show this one element. This is a waterfront structure. And again, just to sort of highlight how I sort of separate this and how it works for me. Typically, these would be done in 2 phases. The dock build would be done as phase 1, and the upper structure would be done as phase 2. So again, this is the generic model of what gets produced. But what I've done is I've separated the 3D models on the side here to be dock and then upper structure framing. So in the dock model, we can really see how these elements all come together. ArchiFrame does a really good job of doing beam joins. So in terms of creating the understructure or even these angled joints here, it's simple with the click of a button. You just draw your beam as you would a typical Archicad beam tool, and then you just click trim element to object, and it automatically does it all. It's really powerful stuff, really, really great. Again, contractors on site love the ability to see this information. In terms of translating this into 2D documentation, we can look at this here. I have a dock plan phase. One of the beautiful things I like about ArchiFrame is we can see that I have this steel element here and it's tagged. ArchiFrame automatically tags the elements from the element ID box that you can kind of see here. So if I were to change that element tag, that element tag automatically updates. But the beautiful part that I like is that everything is centered. So you can tell through the display menus within ArchiFrame, which is just a built-in plugin here. It in. Okay. So you can see through here, we have beams, walls, trusses, so we can kind of customize the menus how we need to. But again, when we go into this model here, I can see these beams and elements. I can even just use the object settings dialog in Archicad, and I can change the material type, the building material. I can change the view settings. I can change the floor plan view colors. I can change how that ID is shown. So if I want it on left to right, right to left, if I want it mirrored, centered, offset from centered, I can customize exactly how I want. So the second I add that beam in, automatically tags it. And then to show how that then translates into the documentation, when I create the schedules, ArchiFrame does a really good job of then transposing those element IDs into a schedule. And then by extension, it gives me actual cut lengths, where I find Archicad itself does not really give the same level of detail or information with the accuracy that I'm hoping to portray. So this is a simple example for a dock, but going back to the model here with a 3D framing perspective, again, we can see the level of detail that we can kind of share and showcase, where if you have something unconventional, it really is an advantage to show this. For example, to pack up the beam, or to pack up the steel riser height because of the different roof pitches, we're showing 3 steel plates in this as an example. Every steel plate is in here. So regardless of where I pull off a section or add an extra detail, it is all shown in the model, even for overframing rafters or for the lookouts with a drop wall below it for support. Everything is shown in this model and then translates to the 2D elements. For example, if I go to the roof framing plan for this element here, it might take a second. Remember, Chaos it always buffers. All the elements can be color coded. The beams are automatically labeled. Our hip and valley rafter beams can be shown. Our blocking required underneath that can be shown. So everything is really able to be fine-tuned and dialed in so that this 2D element matches the 3D model, which then effectively matches the final building when it's built on site. The last kind of one that I said I would show in more detail is this one here. So again, relatively complicated build in terms of trying to integrate trusses and rafters and wall framing. There's a lot of elements in this building too that require tall wall framing on the backside. So we're using something like a Weyerhaeuser LSL stud, if you guys are familiar with that. But again, to sort of drive down the individual elements and components, I've been able to separate these out for foundation plans. And again, all of my pad footings and strip footings, I've been able to convert to an ArchiFrame element, which allowed me to then show them in the schedules as I showed before. But I'm able to then highlight out the foundation plan, the beams and columns just as themselves to sort of visualize where just the structural components are in this building, and then detail out in high detail the wall framing. So as an example, I mean, this project is relatively complex. I was able to frame out this entire building, walls, rafters, trusses, and foundation in about, I have to go back and add it up, but probably somewhere in the neighborhood of like 12 to 13 hours, which sounds like a lot, but to provide the detail where I don't need to 2D detail any element on a drawing, I think it's a huge advantage. And just the ability to share this information and how it interacts with the building to get it across, I think is hugely powerful. I mean, we're showing TJI floor joists. One of the elements that we needed to kind of share in this particular project was how we set up the beams. We wanted everything to be flushed into the building. So we went with a steel beam header in here, and we can kind of see here how there's a big drop from the underside of the steel beam to the 16-inch I-joist, floor joists. And that's primarily so that we can get plumbing and HVAC and mechanical structures underneath without needing to cut joist or to drop bulkheads in this building. So again, to be able to share this level of information with the client is hugely powerful. Further to that, this model being exported then to BIMX, this is where I think it's truly powerful from a contractor perspective, because that level of documentation is then exported out. So again, all those 3D models and elements are put into this same ArchiFrame element. We can kind of see how this building is getting built, how everything is interacting with each other. But what I find truly powerful in terms of being able to utilize this with schedules is if I go to a structural plan and I want it to go to a footing plan, for example, because I've been able to hyperlink the tag properly the footings or the beams or columns, everything now appropriately shows up in a schedule. So for example, here in this strip footing schedule, I'm able to show a footing schedule. That footing schedule has a width, a depth, it has a tag, it has the construction elements for that specific footing. But if I wanted to then click on that element, I can now actually select that element in BIMX, which then takes me directly to that element in 3D, so I can see where that element is in order to find it. Same thing for beams and columns. If I go to the beam and column page, in here, I'm able to then either click on a section view, or I can go to my beam schedule, which we can see here. And if I want to know where B8 is in that specific model, I can open that and it automatically takes me to where beam 8 is. So if I'm able to, if I'm having difficulty finding it in a plan view, I can easily take it to there. And then same thing, because all these elements are in 3D, I can grab a section view of this building and I can open section in 2D, or I can open it in 3D if you're familiar with anything like that, but I can take it like that, or open that section in 2D, and now it actually brings it through. So I can see in real space where that section's being taken through. And since all these elements are brought in via ArchiFrame's 3D version, all of this is now an element of the structure. So I don't need to add the 2D Xbox symbol for wall framing top plate. I don't need to add in an I-joist 2D element and then array that across at 16 inches. It's implemented in here directly right away. So that's sort of high level in terms of how it interacts with BIMX. And then working closely with ArchiFrame, the output for wall framing, for example, as Tom sort of alluded to, the documentation is automatically generated from the ArchiFrame wall element tool. So it gives you cut lists, it gives you beam locations, it tags everything with dimensions, it gives you squared off dimensions here, it gives you cut lists even for paneling. So in terms of ease, in that 12 to 13 hours that it took me to frame out that building, it now automatically generates the, if I go back to here, for example, it automatically generates the wall framing layers. So if I go into main level framing, as soon as I draw out that wall framing element, it shows all those elements in 2D. It automatically creates the 2D drawing of that individual wall element. It gives cut lists, and this very simply, by being able to select that option and going into hidden behind all my, there you go. Going into here, I can CNC printing and layouts, and it automatically creates all of those drawings on a sheet size of my selection that I wanted to in my layout book. So for example, all of these are the individual wall elements, automatically created, automatically generated on a specific sheet size. So it's a really powerful tool. The contractors absolutely love it. It's just a secondary check from everybody's perspective. So yeah, that's sort of a high level walkthrough of how I use it. the power that it has to produce the output. And yeah, Tom, I mean, do you guys have any questions? You want to run through some stuff in that regard?
That was a great overview. Really appreciate that. Certainly a lot of good information about how you're using it. So, for those who would like to ask questions, we obviously have some time for that, and would go ahead and so to do that, just go ahead in the control panel there, go to the questions area, start entering your questions in, and then I'll go and take that. Let's see, we got first question here. Great presentation. Is it possible to get the BIMX model?
I would probably not want to share this public. Most of the stuff and the clients I deal with typically like to keep their stuff a little bit more private. I hope that's understandable. But yeah, I mean, if I know we had the user group next week, I can kind of dive into a little bit more detail, maybe with the BIMX stuff in that user group, if that's something that you want to look at, Tom.
Yeah, certainly. And also, just as a note, we are recording today's webinar, so you can certainly review that. And then next week, if you'd like to join us, you can join the user group. Just go to learnvirtual.com, click on the user group tab, and you can register there. Let's see. What about structural engineering calculations, etc.?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not an engineer myself. The engineer that I deal with on a regular basis, I actually work with them. They don't use ArchiFrame, they use Revit. It's our choice of words sometimes, but there are some stress analysis, and I know the people at ArchiFrame can probably answer this a little bit better than I could. I don't deal with the stress analysis on a regular basis. But I do share the 3D models with the engineer, and we talk in detail. So we are able to or they are able to pull calculations from the information from the model. But specifically, I don't deal with that myself. So I can't be the best person to answer that.
Not a problem. Actually, you just mentioned Revit. There was a question here, so I'm just going to go ahead and lead into that. You mentioned using Revit. What made you switch to Archicad?
I know we kind of chatted about this the other day. So I found, I used Revit for probably 3 years. I was really fluid with it. I found that I was missing a lot of stuff in terms of the construction element that we're dealing with on a regular basis. I found that Revit didn't really allow me to do a lot of the customizations and handle the individual components that I needed to for custom builds. My personal opinion is I found Revit was really geared towards commercial or multi-unit residential, where it was copy pasted from one building to the next. I really like the Archicad user interface better. I like the customizations. It feels a little bit more like a push-pull type of BIM environment, as opposed to just a structured, coordinated element like a Revit would be. I switched 2 years ago. I don't think I will ever go back to Revit. I had to finish off a few projects in Revit after I made the switch, and I absolutely hated it. I think this is a way better system and way better setup to kind of move forward with now.
Great answer. Okay, so next question. There's a lot of questions coming in. It's great. Can you discuss your method of coordination with structural engineers and how you bring specified structural members into your model?
Yep. So, it's a great question. So a few things that I do. I use a sizer tool for a large majority of the spans. So I kind of preemptively size a lot of the components before it even goes to the engineer. There's two different elements that kind of come back from the engineer. So to sort of go back to incorporating the elements and the beams or whatever it needs to be. So in the you can see this. Yeah. So in the ArchiFrame menus, inside the beam tool, there are a multitude of options here. We have conversion of elements, but we also have the placement of elements. So in here under plank type, I've actually gone through, and ArchiFrame has helped me, like the developers at ArchiFrame have helped me, and I can create some myself. Just in a similar fashion to creating complex profile in Archicad, you can create a profile of beams, columns, whatever you need. So you can see here I have all my 2x4, 8, 10, 12s, my LVL sizes, typical HSS. So in terms of placing an element, it's really a matter of grabbing a beam. So for example, if I want to place a steel beam, I could grab a W8x28 and I can just change the layer that I want to put that beam on. And simply, if I wanted to add that element in 3D, I can add that element in 3D. And now all of a sudden, I'll put it way too far away, but that element is now a W8x28 steel beam added in 3D. Coordinating with the engineer, they're able to interact with the BIMX version of the model and the 2D plans that I export. They do the calculations. And if, for example, I put in a W8x28, but it needs to be a W8x40, simply all I would need to do is select that beam in here, change it from W8x28 to W8x40, and it automatically updates the framing, it updates the schedule, it updates everything just from the click of a button.
Great. Good answer. Another question. Will the roof frames automatically update with will the roof frames automatically update it when we modify the roofs?
No. So that right now is the walls will update and the window openings will update. The roof will not update. Out of that 12 to 13 hours that I sort of chatted about here initially, that is the only thing that that takes the most time. So to create the trusses, for example, the trusses are actually created. It's a little bit of a process. Once you figure out the process, it's easy. How I do it is I create a section view through the model. And to create a truss, you can do it from a fill. So in the truss menu, you would create a section view, draw your lines, you fill the line with a hatch fill, and then simply you just select the fill and you say pick from fill truss, and it creates that truss profile. So again, if you change the roof pitch, for example, it would you would require to re-update that fill to change it for the profile. But in terms of handling that from a workflow perspective, I don't add any of the framing elements to the building until after I have sign off on the architectural design. So I will do all my schematic design and design development without any of the wall framing or any of the roof framing in the model. It's really conceptual until they approve the sign off, and then I take it back and now implement all of the structural elements. So the hope is, in theory, that your roof lines aren't changing when it's time to add the roof framing elements to the model.
Great, thank you. Another question. What's the difference between the full program and the architect's version? So I guess we can kind of talk about two things that you're discussing with me. So first off, you are using the full program, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so the architect's version, which is really a light version or start version, has a few key features in there that you can kind of see when you go to the website. But like being able to do fascia around the roof and some other things. So it's more geared toward just some detailing, architectural detailing components, but it's not really for full-on framing. So I would recommend that you go to the website for ArchiFrame, go to the AF Start page, and you can kind of see that's available for that. Next question. Can you please describe or demonstrate the process of going from standard Archicad elements to generating the framing model?
So in terms, just to get clarity on the question. So are you terms in creating the plank types, or in terms of a Yeah, so I'm just a bit confused about the question.
I think, let me see, read that again. So I guess maybe just describe, you know, you can demonstrate if you want to, or describe it, it's fine too. It's just really, let's say, for example, you have a wall. How do you take that
Yeah.
wall and then turn it into framing? Or how do you take that roof?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the roof is a bit more complex. It's a little bit more detailed, but I mean, if I want to do a very quick level here, let me just go here. In terms of creating a wall, it's relatively straightforward. I can kind of do a quick demonstration of it. So if I draw a 2D wall, I have to say thanks to Jared at Shoenome, a lot of my template is set up from his baseline. And then I've sort of just customized it from there. But if I take a 2x6 wall, I just do it over here. And I take my wall, I draw my wall out. This is the typical ArchiFrame element. In terms of detailing this out with a, you know, let's just throw an opening in here just for fun. Let's just do that, just so we can kind of have the parameters set in there too for a header. So in terms of detailing this wall out, it's a two-step process. So step one is you create what's actually called the ArchiFrame element. So it's the element that the framing gets attached to. So for example, in this one here, I can create different layer types for the different type of wall framing I want to do. So 2x6, 2x4, 2x8, 2x10. So I'll do this element here, for example, 2x6 framing with boarding. Step one is you create the element with a line. So you can basically select the core layer, which is what I would do here. So I'd select that element and I would draw and trace over top of that. And you can see how that element gets applied over top. So that's how you can kind of handle it. The nice thing is if you do have special customizations that you want to do in 3D, the nodes can be individually selected as well and changed. But you can see how this tags itself. And then simply all you do after it's highlighted is you hit create planks. It buffers. And again, I do this typically, when I do that building, for example, I will draw the element over every wall, and then I will highlight every wall, and I put the framing on every wall. So now if I go back to my 3D framing perspective, that wall is detailed out, it's highlighted. I have in my settings menu, which ArchiFrame did help me set up, I like my headers at the top of the wall under the top plate, and it frames down. If I needed to change anything, for example, is very quick and easy to edit those through the menus to change the lintel. So for example, even if, let's say we didn't have any in here and I wanted to change that to be 2x10 lintels, I can select what is technically the lintel in this model. I can open this up. I can change it to be a 2x10 lintel. I want two 2x10s. I want to have it with one jack stud underneath it. I want to keep the original one there, and I click OK, and it automatically adds now the 2x10 in the model on the exterior side where it belongs, and that window opening stays the same. And then again, from just doing that simple process, if I can find it, hopefully I'll find it. If I open up that floor plan view where that wall is created, a lot of walls in this project, that drawing automatically creates itself for what it is. So that's very high level, quickly how to sort of implement the wall framing and how easy it is to do. It's just a couple of clicks of a button.
That was great. Really good demonstration. Very simple, very straightforward, and fast. Let's see. Next question. I'm glad to see we've got a lot of questions coming through. Does ArchiFrame automatically generate sheathing based on the position of studs, and can you show the sheathing in 3D?
You can. It does. I should not have deleted that. Let me just control zoom. You see I got it back here. You can, and it does. Typically, I just leave it hidden Now I need to figure out what layer I have it on. I think it automatically puts it on this AF4 layer. So it automatically does the sheeting. I have it set up. I don't know if the standards are different where you are. To me, the standard is horizontal sheeting. It does the panel layouts based on the stud locations, and then those panel layouts come through in that drawing frame. So if I go back to here, again, I just have it turned off for simplicity, but then those panels or the plywood then also export into the cut list that's there.
And do you actually, with the sheathing, have that turned on for being able to show that with details or wall sections, etc.?
Yeah, so in the sections and details, it shows on there for sure. But just for simplicity and cleanliness, I don't show it on these plans. Every contractor I found does sheeting their own way. So in my experience, they appreciate the ability to see the wall framing, especially in a complex wall. You know, something like this is a really good example of a complex wall system, where it really shows the thought process behind it, especially when we're dealing with lots of extra jack studs under structural lintels. And those cut lists and the material type, again, 16-inch LVL, 11 7/8 LVL, that's what they appreciate. The board panel layout, I think they truly just do on site. So I have the ability to share it, but I choose not to unless they ask for it.
Great answer. Thank you so much. Let's see. Cut links in schedule. How does this work for rafters with angled cuts? Can a schedule link to a diagram showing how the rafters should be cut?
I'm sure it can. I feel like one of the ArchiFrame developers might have to answer that question. I don't do I don't do a schedule for rafters. I do a schedule just for the main structural components, beams and columns. I don't see why it couldn't. Like, for example, if I go to a rafter framing plan, I've just never built a schedule that way, but it would be easy enough to do so. There we go. So for example, I mean, this is my rafter framing plan. I don't have them tagged, but it should easily be, if I were to tag that RF1, it automatically tags it as RF1, and I could create a schedule that would be linked to RAF1, and the length parameter for that, we can look at it here. Yeah, it should give you the overall length of, so for example, if it's 4 feet long on a horizontal plane, but it's 5 feet long because of the angle, it will give you the length dimension on the angle of 5 feet.
Great.
Yes, it should do that correctly. Because again, and I looked at this too, I mean, you can see the length parameter in here, 6'9 3/4. But if I were to open up the ArchiFrame model here in the CNC profile, you can see, keep getting hidden behind my menus. You can see here how in that CNC it gives like every cut that's done to that is part of the machining list. So again, I don't do manufacturing, but you would be able to export this with the cuts as a CNC model. So it should display correctly. It would just be a matter of dealing that schedule customizing.
Good answer. Thank you. Let's see. Okay. Is the ArchiFrame element associated with the wall such that changing the original wall changes the framing?
No, the ArchiFrame, no. So you would have to update the ArchiFrame element so that the objects inside the element would shift with it.
Right, because they're separate pieces that are drawn. Yeah, that makes sense. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Um, can can you convert ArchiFrame elements to, let's see, can you convert ArchiCAD elements to ArchiFrame objects?
Yes. So
ArchiCAD elements to ArchiFrame objects, yes.
yeah, so that's what I do with strip footings, for example. So I have a complex profile for strip footing. So if I look at my complex profiles, I have a complex profile for a footing or a thickened edge or a thickened slab. So if I wanted to do that, it's quite straightforward. So if I were to add that, I would use the beam tool within Archicad. I would select for example, I want this thickened slab edge here. I could select that. I could draw that beam in 2D. So now if I go to my model, just make sure it's on the right layer. Let's just put on a framing layer. I know this is not right, but let's just put it there so it shows up properly. Today that's a rafter. So I go back to my framing element. We can see that that's now the Archicad element. I can take that and use the beam tool and convert it to an ArchiFrame element simply. And now that element is using the ArchiFrame interface as opposed to the Archicad interface. So again, I can now go through and change the building material to be whatever I want it to be. It's structural. If I want to change the tag of that element now, you can see that it displays in 3D. I can change that to be beam 800, and it automatically updates to be beam 800 in that scenario.
That's a great answer. Let's see. Okay. Also, have any of your projects been prefabricated or supported by CNC integration, such as generating G code directly from your model? If so, how did that impact efficiency and workflow?
I have not. I've had a conversation with a contractor who's had an interest in doing it, but I've never actually implemented it. No.
Got it. Okay. Could you share your experience with automating the process using ArchiFrame? Are there any contractors in your region who utilize automation?
None using automation, no. But in terms of dealing with ArchiFrame, it's been awesome. The team there has helped me immensely in terms of creating customization, understanding the process in terms of using the software. And truthfully, for what it's worth, they have a really, really great, I think it's like a 12 or 13 part YouTube series. So in terms of learning the software, it was relatively quick and easy to learn. I find the menus very intuitive. The team has been great in answering my questions. They're very responsive. And they have a YouTube tutorial that kind of takes you through the workflow, in terms of adding a wall, adding the element to the wall, creating the object inside that element, dealing with work planes and that type of stuff. It's been a great process. It's been a great time dealing with them so far.
Awesome. Let's see, another question. Is it, in fact, we have two questions left, so I think we're going to conclude with these two questions.
Okay.
Is it possible to automatically assign basic ArchiCAD properties to ArchiFrame elements, such as structural function, position, etc.?
Yeah, so I'm assuming that means in terms of the classification and properties, maybe by clarity, but yeah, all those elements are still part of that in here. So if I need to change that to a different classification, yes, all those filters still work the same way.
Great, good answer. Can this program show hangers / Simpson hardware?
I don't know about Simpson hardware specific. I believe in the most recent update, and again, they might better answer. I believe they do have hangers now as part of their option. What I have done, I don't know if you can see, I think I have them on a different layer. I've just downloaded the Simpson hangers from Simpson's website in a Revit format, or and just use model port to create them as an object in Archicad, and then I just implement them in Archicad. For example, here I actually put in the VAF2 rafter hangers, or the VAB2 rafter hangers, and the HUC 210 or whatever it is rafter hangers on the skewed one here as well.
Terrific. Great answer. All right. So we're almost at the hour here at 10 o'clock here, from wherever you guys, anybody might be. So we're going to go ahead and conclude, so that we kind of keep on time. Couple things. First, Michael, thank you very much for the presentation. I've gotten a lot of people here saying that it's been a great presentation. So it's been received well.
Good. I'm glad to hear.
Also, for those of you who might want to maybe hear some more details about maybe some of the questions that we were maybe answered partially, but we'll try to answer in more detail, you come to the user group next week. We have a Archicad user group. It's free to join. Just go to learnvirtual.com. Just join Learn Virtual. There's an Archicad user group option that's free, and then you can access and register for the user group. User group will be next Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific. So you're welcome to do that. And then Michael will be there as well, reviewing more detail about how he uses this, so we can get into more detail on that. So with that, Michael, is there anything else you'd like to share before we conclude?
No, I appreciate the time today, and I appreciate everybody taking a listen to me ramble on for the last hour. Hopefully everybody found it useful, and yeah, it's been a great experience, so really appreciate it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, we really appreciate your being online. Look forward to you at the user group next week, and we'll continue this conversation.
Beautiful. Looking forward to it.
Great. Oh, and also for those who asked about it, I'll follow up with more details too. In terms of if you want more information, I've had several people reach out and say they'd like to have more information on it. Just reach out to myself. You can just go to info@archvista.com. That'll go to me, and also to our general email for people here. And you can also just go onto our website, go to connect, and also just select there to connect with us. And then we'll get you more detail on ArchiFrame, pricing, and all that good stuff. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining today, and appreciate, again, Michael, for the time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.